as we go on here, so that we can complete this for folks like Jacob listening in. In terms of what the flow looks like with this tooling, along with the modeling, right, and the protocols that are layered inside the three-tier clan system, protocols for decision making, that have all these mechanisms for streamlining bottom-up voices, right? I always give the analogy that boardrooms tend to, streamline decision making by minimizing voices. And so one of the things that stood out in our research in these indigenous modes, our direct dialogue with the Indigenous Council, are the ways that all voices are maximizing voices instead of minimizing voices can be streamlined. Something that we're not too familiar with in a system of boardrooms and domestic international law, right? And so what I'm posting here in the meeting chat are getting into zooming in closer and closer to what's actually happening with the use of the tooling and the protocols of the clan system, where the traits start to come in to more and more importance. For those who don't know maybe as concretely as others, there's ways to relate wolf, maybe more obvious ways to relate wolf clan traits and characteristics to what's going on in a Web3 ecosystem, right? The constantly moving and picking up of important issues, the gathering of consensus. But there's other, clans, right? There's Turtle Clan that actually comes first in the sequence, Bear Clan that comes last. And you can really look at Turtle Clan as the engineer, architect, master engineer, architect, holding the blueprints or design, right, for a given ecosystem, or in the indigenous context, you're talking about the overall regenerative design that we live in, right, going up to the stars, right, and a firm understanding of this, the way that an engineer or architect would understand the nooks and crannies of a house, right? And so the language that comes along with Turtle is owner of the house for this reason, right? And this reference to the foundation of the sequence, the first in the sequence, right? And so there's ways that makes sense for the open source ecosystems, the Stacks ecosystem, Web3 ecosystem. Folks have a firm understanding of what can't be evil. The slogan, at one point for Blockstack, and still a big part of the ethos for the core community members. What this is referencing in terms of privacy, in terms of the user-owned internet, empowered user-owned internet, what it means for open source convictions, right? And just a firm grasp for everything that's going on in the ecosystem, right? These are good, maybe they have actual engineering or design backgrounds, right? Maybe not. But this is something that folks can identify with in terms of deep functions or roles in the ecosystem. Another characteristic that comes with them are observers and validators against core values, right, of the collective, like I mentioned, right, whether it be a user-empowered internet, open source, so on and so forth, right? So observers and validators, not so much active like the wolf that you see, right? I can identify with this in ways, right? To Nat's point, right? Back in 2016, I lurked for I think 2 years before getting more and more comfortable, secure with using your voice, right, in these particular spaces, especially if you're not comfortable or familiar with these spaces, right? As a non-tech person, for example. So that, more of observing going on, right? But still valuable and deep functioning ecosystem for a lot of folks. And so we went through Wolf already, and so I'll briefly touch on what can be a lot packed into Bear Clan, otherwise known as Medicine Clan, or to relate it to Web3 or Stacks ecosystem, important for transformation or holding the knowledge of transition. Right. There's a whole lot of paradigm shifting that happens coming into specifically a stacks ecosystem, right, with open source convictions or privacy convictions that you may not have in other Web3 spaces. Even smart contract language wise, right, there might be some transformative ideas folks might have to get exposed to coming from more Ethereum-based smart contract writing, so on and so forth, right? And so there's different ways that folks can identify with Bear Clan as well. There's also just these this concept of bridge work and things like this that can help identify the traits of Bear Clan as well. But just general evolution or transformation, the way medicine can transform you from being ill to being sick or what have you, so on and so forth. So these, I just want to give a debriefing there for folks who may not know how this indigenous dialogue has informed the deeper function that organizing ourselves in this way can help us tap into and then bring into decision-making protocols. And so that's what you see with this second diagram here, where you can actually see a flow. The first diagram kind of shows, actually, I can start with the first one at the top, where it's kind of a vertical diagram showing flows between wolf, bear, and turtle. And here you start to see these traits come into play. Wolf Clan is what presents issues on the floor formally. And once you're already past this preliminary phase where most of the consensus happens, we have this formal phase, right? And this is kind of a zoomed in picture. So maybe I'll start with the second picture here that shows both female and male prospects in the preliminary phases. So this is important because, like I just said, the bulk of consensus happens in preliminary. And you can see here that there are autonomous processes for both male and female clans. And this is an important point of distributed power. And the streamlining of it that you'll see later on. But there's a motif of autonomy that we should start to point out, probably, starting here, that we've learned from these indigenous modes. That is, it's very hard to have genuine dialogue, right, or genuine consensus, right, if there's interference in processes. If you zoom out to the nation scale, right, if there's espionage between nations, right, is there really authentic diplomacy if they come down to sit at the table for dialogue, right, to come together on a position, right? Or is this something else, right? Or is this inauthentic diplomacy, right? Or has dialogue been contaminated, right? And so there's a similar thing going on here in terms of distributed power between male and female decision making. This idea of distributed power in the long term also rings true for balanced decision making, right? In the long term, right, you can see conventionally there's a Bayesian of attraction towards the voices of women being drowned out, but not just the voices of women, the voices of everything regenerative, right, from ecosystems to whatever we can imagine, right, in terms of regenerative innovation, right, this can get eventually drowned out, right, in terms of expressive or labor extraction, right, if it gets too concentrated, right, or gets too robust because of conventional ways that technology and social economics co-constitute one another, right. To pay attention to this, historical fact is important when designing our tooling and our models, right, around governance, which is applicable, across Web3, and just in general, right. It's something that we obviously haven't figured out yet, and this is part of Primavera's warning, right? We have to figure this out, and these indigenous modes seem to be pointing to very fundamental mechanisms of autonomy, functional mechanisms for autonomy, and this is one of them. Eventually, the women and the men do come together in decision making. It's after the bulk of consensus has already happened. So after particularly the women have had and the men have had autonomous decision making already, then they come together on the positions that they've come together autonomously on, right? And so, with the idea that the bulk of consensus happens in the preliminaries and then is, formalized, just formalized. Everything that was agreed to in those threads that you saw Haas show earlier, some of you, is basically the consensus, right? And it's felt, as Haas said, that there's no disagreement here. And so it's just a formalization process. 9 out of 10 times there's not going to be any dissent or need for heavy deliberation, informal decision making. And this is the first time that the men and women come together. And so not only do you see a streamlining of bottom-up voices, including as many voices as possible instead of minimizing, you also start to see a streamlining of distributed power between the women's voices and the men's voices, because the first time that they come together, the majority of consensus has already happened, and it's genuinely a coming together of decisions, right, of positions, and we can get into some of the nuances of that seem to have even further functional mechanisms of autonomy embedded into it. But this is the general flow, and this is what the use of the tooling looks like with the use of the models, right? Active issues changes a little bit because it'll be clan respective to different clans picking up this very modular tooling, right? And using it differently, how they need to use it, right? For the respective time zones of the people involved, the respective schedules of the people involved. And so, Merrick mentioned something beautiful in the last session about the modularity of this all, and how, the folks involved in this system design, this horizontal system design, bottom-up system design, can all add different things onto this tooling that Haas has developed for us with these models in mind. And so I'll shut up now before getting into zooming in a little bit further on these protocols. I'll leave any questions, right, for some of these concepts of autonomy or streamlining, and all of this. And thank you kindly for enduring me.
I don't have any questions, Harold, but I got a jet a little bit early today. It was nice to see you guys, and I'm going to be posting my first data thing very soon, contributing to the ecosystem a lot. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Oh, beautiful, man. Thank you kindly for your time and your ears today and your voice. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Have a beautiful day. Yeah, we'll leave the floor open though as well. Thank you. I'll get back into it then. Let's see. I guess you still have Nat with us to learn some of these things, and I'm sure there's still questions from folks that may have heard this a couple times already today. But I'll get back into some of these diagrams in the meeting chat. The more vertical one gets into is a little bit more zoomed in on what happens once you're in the formal proposals together. In terms of both the men and the women for the first time, right? The Wolf Clan is what presents issues to the floor. Initiator, it's a part of the traits, right? Initiator, pushing things forward, right? Bringing issues to the floor, right? So you start to see already how these traits start to play into decision-making protocol, right? And it's the liberation happens between wolf and bear. These are the liberators. Bear is good for liberation, and that 1 time out of 10 that you want to keep an issue alive. You want folks that have identified with knowledge of all the knowledge of transition, right? How to keep that issue alive. And so you can start to see again how these traits start to play into the placement of these particular clans in the decision-making process. And then finally in the flow is what's actually first in the sequencing, and that's turtle. this validator against all core collective constitution or indigenous cosmology, which includes regeneration, matrilineal heritage throughout ecosystems, and so when it's, in an open source context, right, it's open source convictions, or in the Stacks ecosystem, it's privacy and user empowerment, right, to the edges of architecture, for internet, right? So if things don't align with this in deliberation, if something's off in deliberation, in consensus that's going on between Wolf and Bear, the issue gets sent back. Right, but if everything's fine, 9 times out of 10 it is. It's just a formalization of the consensus that has happened in the prelims, right? And it goes right through. It gets made official. So this is the general flow. Let's see people maybe coming in and out. And so right after that vertical, the formal consensus diagram gets you a little bit closer to what's going on in protocols as well, and what can be used with the tooling in terms of the real-time meetings or the asynchronous threads that can get made into official documents, brought on and off chain, into on and off chain processes. This is a layout that is informed by the indigenous dialogue, that can also inform how we ensure legitimacy in the asynchronous threads. It also shows another nuance, a fundamental mechanism of autonomy, right? The layout is informed by the cosmology, right? The same way that the clan system is, right? And so they're placed very intentionally, right? They're only clans that are not sitting next to each other, right? It's the Turtle Clan, the last piece in this flow. So when it comes for time for deliberation, the bears, female and male, right, coming together for the first time, are already sitting next to each other. The wolves are already sitting next to each other. When it comes time for the male and female turtles to get down in deliberation, the very little deliberation that does happen, and coming together in positions of what's already been discussed in the prelims. Someone has to get up and walk across the council floor in a physical context. This isn't just a mere logistics thing. It's very intentional. It's an indicator of how you can come together on a position, where the balance is going to come from, right, when coming together in consensus. The capacity for regenerative abundance to wrap its mind around extractive scarcity, but not vice versa, right? And so, there's this streamlining of autonomy for a matrilineal heritage, again, built into this very nuanced protocol, that in our tooling can look like, one of it can look like the initiation of the process, right? In terms of making an official document, right? It can look like this is initiated always by the women, right? And not just as a mere logistics protocol, but as an indicator of how we can actually achieve consensus, right? How you can actually build in resilience in not just your balance between men and women's decision making long term, right? But also build in the consideration for the autonomy of our ecosystems, and so on and so forth. And so you see a streamlining of these protections, right, in a lot of ways, as you get deeper and deeper into these protocols. And so these are the things that are going to be layered on top of the tooling. And it's not just lip service to autonomy, but built-in mechanisms for functional autonomy, felt autonomy, for the long term, hopefully. And I know we're pretty deep into this now, but this is some of the things that we're excited to share, right? We're coming right from indigenous dialogue. Some of these things more recent learners than others, but all of them exciting for what can mean for not just lip service in DAOs, the autonomy part of DAOs, but built-in felt autonomy, and how that is closely related to regenerative commons, another part of these indigenous modes and some of our overall system design model for advocates. This felt access to regenerative commons, whether that's in the form of upskilling, relationships with each other, networking in some way, shape, or form, right? This is the type of things we want to bring to the forefront, along with intrinsic motivations that we've asked people to look at to guide them when looking for what they identify with in a clan so far, right? So we've had folks take inventory of all their different intrinsic motivations as opposed to extrinsic motivations like monetary or status-driven incentives. And we're really trying to bring those to the background, right? We're not leaving them alone completely, because it's a big part of not having points of pure extraction of labor or expression or what have you, particularly labor. But we also want to bring to the foreground these incentives of long-term sustainability, of upskilling, networking, of horizontal access to this networking and upskilling, things that we've already seen appreciated by folks and advocates, and seemingly shortened learning curves that I'm sure you're familiar with in the Web3 space can be pretty steep, depending on what silo you fall into. So, I'll shut up now, but I think this is pretty much wrapping up in a similar place where we wrapped up previous sessions around trying to expose people how to use this tooling, not just by itself, because right now it has none of these models attached to it, but these sessions being recorded and folks participating in them will allow for us for the first time to start using this tooling along with these models for important decisions around iterating on our own code of conduct, more treasury decisions. These type of things will be coming up in coming weeks to start testing out how folks can pick up this tooling and use it for their respective needs and their respective clans. But, I don't know how we did that back to back, but we did it. And thank you, Connie, for enduring all of this. I'll leave the floor open for any questions, comments. Just throw something at me and tell me that made no sense. All of that is welcome.
I'm just listening. No, I'm just getting it. Just slowly going through the channels as well, like while I'm listening as well. So I'm listening and picking up. That's all. I'm taking it right now.
Beautiful, right? Beautiful. Well, thank you, Connie, for your ears. There's recordings too. Thank you, Connie, to folks like Hero and Merrick. I think largely here through the end of the sessions with me because they are recording. I don't want to hold you guys hostage too much longer. But thank you, Connie, for the recording, because I know folks like Nat and other folks will appreciate being able to look back on some of the demos of the tooling. Nat, Haas, I don't know if you caught some of that, but Haas, did a couple of demos earlier today. Actually, maybe 3 in one day. So there's a lot of recordings around and floating around, whether it's the Governance Working Group YouTube coming up shortly. I'll make sure to upload there. But also Merrick and Hero upload right into the Meeting Notes channel here. We have a long history of what we're calling sense-making sessions whenever we come together. But including this one will be there for watching as well. But thank you kindly, everybody, for enduring me. And I hope some of this is as exciting for y'all as it is for me to be able to share and expose to the ecosystem, have built into tooling, be a part of tangible networking and what our Ivy League research groups. It's pretty surreal from my own background. So I hope you guys feel the same way in some way. But so I'll shut up and the floor open.
I'll just add one minor comment for Atlas. So if you feel like it's overwhelming or certainly for me, the first time it was like, what the hell is he talking about? So if you have that feeling, it's perfectly normal. Like I felt really like I, I think it was a lot for me to digest, and I didn't have that sort of mentality before. So yeah, like that's perfectly normal. But and another comment would be like they are these people, they're here like the core people, they're explaining all these things. In my opinion, they're being really humble about like what is happening here. Like the way I think about it personally is this is like a little innovation hub, um, and it's coming churning out some like pretty cool like innov- innovative kind of structure or governance kind of um, things. So for me, it's kind of like a little innovation hub. I don't know if that helps you to put it in context, but that's how I put put it in context, and hopefully, various innovation that comes out of it can be applied to the Stacks community wide, or maybe outside Stacks. It's not it's Web3.
Yeah, thank you kindly, Euro. And yeah, I think Innovation Hub is perfectly fine to bring to the forefront of the language, right? I think innovation decoupled from top-down power is precisely, top-down concentration of power, wealth, right? Is precisely what could be an extension of what Stacks was trying to do, what Blockstack was trying to do originally in terms of decoupling developers from VCs, decoupling users from conventional internet architecture, right? And then watching the innovation rate expand, right? Well, even more happens when you decouple the way we organize ourselves from these conventional models of top-down, scarcity-based, right, instead of regenerative commons-based models, bottom-up, horizontal models, right? And watch what happens to the innovation rate when that occurs, right? When generators of value can define the terms that they work and live in, the structures that they work and live in. And that's precisely what Advocates is all about. And it's a beautiful thing that you're starting to put your finger on the rate of innovation because of this, hopefully as well. And hopefully it's just a marker for what's to come. Thank you kindly again for the paraphrasing. It helps. And maybe it helps refine some of our language around what we want as incentives, right? Because upskilling and networking and all of these things are part and parcel to what is ultimately innovation. Thank you.
Hey, y'all, it sounds like you're probably closing up, but I have a friend who I've been trying to get on the server this entire time, and I think he might be on the precipice of entering. I'd love to just introduce him before you close. What do you think? Do you need to run away?
No, of course, this is fine. Of course, we are just ending, but of course, it's plenty of time for an introduction and to meet somebody. Eric, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think I probably gotta drop, but it's been good. It's been really good. Hearing it explained a couple times through, and it's so exciting, man. Yeah. And I'm thinking of maybe like trying some of this out in different little sideline communities. I don't know, just different people that I've met. It's like I think this tooling is almost at a place where I'm like, hey, check it out. And so maybe making some documentation around this stuff. And also myself, like I still need to read through like Verdal's contract. I'd like to understand it fairly well. I know it's within my capacity of what I can do. I've just been lazy. But yeah, it's exciting stuff. I haven't been lazy. I've been busy. But yeah, thanks for today, man. And I'm probably gonna step out.
Thank you for your time.
We did it.
Welcome.
Good.
Oh no, your audio, dang. We didn't fix that.
Almost.
Oh no.
Point figures out.
Everyone else has a hard time hearing Jabali too, am I right?
Yeah. It sounds like it may be connection thing.
I think it's a mic thing, like sometimes what happens with you and me.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it, but we were focused on getting him. We're interrupting you, Jabali, because when you talk, we can't hear. We can't understand you.
At all. Yeah, you're barely coming through at all.
But
You're welcome.
I'll get a meeting.
we'll get you another call soon. Now that you can see everything, you can get. I can show you around and stuff. But this is Harold. There's lots of videos. There's like videos from today's call and stuff that'll be posted under meeting notes too that you can watch, and you'll hear Harold talk and other folks.
Please take a look at those. You'll be one of the fastest catch-ups you can get, in terms of recent updates and goings on. And so some folks that just came in themselves, fairly newcomers to the system, and there was a debriefing of the entire system to them along with some demos. So it's perfect. It's a perfect thing to come in on.
Yeah, I wish if we could hear Jabali, it'd be a great time for him to introduce himself. I'm sorry. I was just so stoked on getting him here. We didn't try to troubleshoot his audio issue as well.
No problem. No worries.
Hit and miss. Swing and miss. All right. Damn. Harold, thank you so much for all your time today and repetition. And I know I was in both of them, and it was very good today. I hope that really sits with folks. We have another one tomorrow at 10 a.m. So.
This wouldn't have been possible without you, Rod, and your coordination. I'm thankful for both sessions. Thank you.
I'm really glad it's working out. Lots of people are showing up. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then another one. I don't know. It's all like around in the event features and stuff. So let me see what Jabali said. Cool.
All right.
All right.
Beautiful day.
Bye, Nat. Bye, Hero.
Take care. Nice meeting you guys.
Nice to meet you, man. Have a good one.